Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Biology Bios. My name is Jim Edelman. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Memphis. And my purpose with this podcast is really twofold. First, I want to let everybody know that the Department of Biological Sciences has really great research talks most Thursdays during the semesters, 4 p.m., Ellington Hall. People from all over the country and the world talking about the really cool research that they do. Also, I'd like to have those folks here on this podcast so we can learn a little bit more about them, how they got where they are, and what really excites them about what they do. And I'll say also that I did steal these questions from Rhett Miller's excellent podcast called Wheels Off, so please check that out as well. But without further ado, let's get to our guest this week. Thanks so much for being here. Dr. Kate LeCroy, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Biology Bios.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'm really happy to chat with you.
So what I generally do to start out with is I have folks give a really brief introduction, kind of who you are, where you are, and like maybe the elevator pitch of like what your general interests are.
Yeah. So, I am a pollination ecologist that loves pollinators and the pollinator side of things, but I also love plants. I'm at Rhodes College. I finally got my dream job at a liberal arts college, and I study bee health and diversity with the help of undergraduate students and community scientists at Rhodes College.
Brilliant. Congratulations, by the way. I know you're a pretty new assistant professor there, right?
Yeah, I just started in January, but I ended a postdoc, and then I did a postdoc for about a couple of years after I did my PhD. So I was very excited. Yeah.
Well, congrats again. And so with that general area, I'd like to know, like, what's a project that you're currently working on that has you particularly excited, and why are you so jazzed about that project?
Yeah, so I have two projects. One is more tentative than the other, but the project that has a lot of steam is documenting our mason bee community in Eastern North America, especially our native species and our introduced species of mason bees. I've been in the past documenting the decline of several native mason bee species. At the same time, concurrently, there are some introduced mason bee species, and one of which has been proliferating quite a lot, and I would call an invasive species. And I've been tracking some fungal agents that have probably been co-introduced with these non-native mason bee species, and seeing how they have been co-introduced into North America and are now found in our native mason bee species nests.
Very interesting. So for those of us not bee or insect oriented, mason bees, are these something that we see commonly? Like what do they look like compared to like the honeybees that we're used to?
Yeah. So starting at the base of like honeybees, when we think of honeybees, they have a colony of workers. They have a queen bee, so there's division of labor, and there's just a big group of highly related individuals living together cooperatively. Whereas we have solitary bees, which are the majority of bee species that we have in the world, of our 20,000 species of bees.
Wow.
So mason bees are solitary bees, meaning that it's every female for itself. After it mates, it goes and finds a nest, and our mason bees nest in hollow cavities found in nature. They're not like those carpenter bees chewing up your front porch or your parents' front porch. They are mason bees that they just take advantage of hollow cavities, like old woodpecker holes or snail shells or crevices in pine cones, you name it. They're happy to make a nest there.
Oh,
and
cool.
It's so fun. And they have their own unique system where they provide all the food that offspring will ever need in a mass provision. They'll lay an egg on it, and then they'll seal up. They'll earn their nickname Mason by creating partitions out of chewed up mud or leaves. Their natural history is beautiful and diverse. But that's what mason bees are.
I feel like I have been calling those wasps.
Well, yeah, because a lot of them are like metallic blue green. They're not, yellow, black stripes. So I
Yeah.
could see that. Yeah.
And I've definitely got some friends that have been using the little the
Bee
holes in
hotels.
my umbrella on my porch,
Oh,
like the
yes,
where
I
the little
love
screw holes are. Like they've definitely masoned those up. Yeah.
I bet so because they do that with like any kind of little missing screw hole. They'll just make that a home too. And what's cool about solitary bees is they're not as territorial as our honeybees and bumblebees, such that they're very docile. You would have to be. I've never been stung by a mason bee myself, and I've handled thousands of them.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean,
Yeah,
they're beautiful to look at. Yeah.
they're so pretty. Yeah.
Um, okay, so I think that gives me kind of an idea of why you're pretty excited about that species. Is there something about like the invasive species that like also just, what intellectually or like conservation wise
Yeah.
gets you excited about invasive species work?
Yeah, so our invasive species, they have this like complex history with humans. Oftentimes we criticize invasive species as if they had their own agency, as if they weren't probably brought here by humans or the infrastructure that we've developed through imperialism and colonization and all these larger forces in our society at work. So oftentimes when we decry native species or invasive species encroaching on our native species, it's usually our own doing. But beyond that intellectual interest, we have in these introduced species. One of them was intentionally introduced by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the 1960s and 70s for
Oops.
beneficial pollination. Oops, indeed.
Yeah.
Things have changed now in terms of whether we want to introduce new bees into an ecosystem intentionally. But unfortunately, that species, Osmia cornifrons, the Japanese horn-faced bee, is still sold on the internet today without any oversight or regulation. And you, as a member of the University of Memphis community, if you could go buy these mason bees online and put them in your backyard, and they tell you you'll save the bees that way.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. So it's not attractive, but that's the way they make money, unfortunately. So I'm very invested in. There's another species. So they sell that one online that was intentionally introduced in the 60s and 70s. But there's this other species that looks exactly like it, Osmiotaurus, which is the one that's been proliferating quite a lot in our studies, in our observational studies. And I'm worried that they are commingling with our Osmia cornifron stocks and those, supplies, and eventually they will break out and become a fully invasive species.
Oh wow. Yeah, that is quite the mess that we've gotten ourselves into, huh?
Yeah, so I'd love some action on that. And in the meantime, I'm just trying to be a witness to say, yeah, these things are happening, right?
Yeah, yeah, super important, right? Like that's one
Yeah.
of our biggest jobs, I feel like, as scientists is just being like, this is what's out there.
Yeah. I think it's Aldo Leopold that said, you have to bear witness to a number of ills in society. It's like a doctor of death witnessing these things. And
Yeah.
some people want to pretend like they don't exist, but others just rush in and say, how can we help?
Yeah. Wow. So okay, so I feel like the Leopold quote is kind of gets towards this next question of like your inspiration and how you got where you are. So like
Yeah.
was there a time that you knew you wanted to be a scientist or a biologist or was this something that kind of like slowly formed over the course of time?
Yeah, so I must admit, I am a bit of a geek. In high school, I did science fairs, and they would just be, basement projects in my parents' house growing up. But I loved trying to get high sample sizes
Oh,
and
that's
try out
fantastic.
wacky things. But what I thought, okay, if I'm good at science in any regard, or if I'm at least stubbornly persistent at experimental design, that must mean I'll go to college and be a doctor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like the,
Yeah.
and and it wasn't until my second semester, sophomore year, I took a field botany class and fell in love with plants. I decided I would much rather hang out with plants. And I love people. I'm a big extrovert, but I just love plants more than people. And so I just had such a great time. And the people, the botanists I've met are were just so welcoming to little old me. And I just got to grow in that community. And that's when after I did a National Science Foundation REU, my during the summer of my junior year, I was hooked. I was like, oh, I can be paid a stipend to do this research and be part of a community, and it's like geeky summer camp, you know.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, definitely I had the similar path a lot of us did that like you're good at biology, you should be a doctor. And it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay, that seems good. I mean, I'm going to date myself on this, but like ER was on TV and I was like, yeah, that looks
Yeah.
cool.
I
I'd like
feel
to be
like
George
ER
Clooney.
still might be on TV, or at least Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. But
Still going.
but you mentioned this REU, which is research experiences for undergraduates. And I mean, there's
Yes.
lots of different programs, but that's a really cool one where you apply. They're
It's
all
so
over the
great.
country. You can do all sorts of different
Yes.
things. You apply to these and they're eye-opening in that like, yeah, okay, maybe you're not going to make as much as a physician, but like somebody
They take you
pays
to new
us to,
places.
yeah, and you can get
Yeah.
paid to like go outside and chase critters.
I think that's a fun summer experience for a college student. I encourage my students to go check them out all the time because not only do you like join a whole new community, but networks are last for a very long time, and you get another set of letter writers. You get to
Yeah.
witness how you grow in science and how hard you work, and what do you do when you hit speed bumps? Well, you get back up and you figure out a new way of attacking the scientific issue. So I think it's
Yeah.
a great experience.
All right. So thinking about those speed bumps,
Mhm.
so we in our field, like there's a lot of speed bumps, right? There's a lot of like
Yeah.
external reviews of our documents and like people
Mhm.
are constantly telling us how we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, some nicely, some less nicely. Um,
Yeah.
but there's also like our inner critic that you come up with an
Mhm.
idea and that inner critic says, well, that's not the best idea, is it? Um,
Mhm.
so I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit. Like, what's your experience with that inner critic, and how do
Yeah.
you get that inner critic to either be quiet or maybe work for you?
Yeah, I think I'm learning how to balance my perfectionism and my inner critic. Um, I, when it comes to writing a paper, I let that little perfectionist come out and make sure the editing's right. But when it comes to evaluating my worth as a scientist or my productivity, I put it on mute. Like I am out here doing my best. And what helps when with along with putting that on mute every now and then, I also surround myself with a community that values me as a human first and as a scientist second. As a member of the community, I want to feel welcomed. And I had the great privilege and joy of working with a PhD advisor who is unfailingly kind and empathetic. And if you can surround yourself with leaders and mentors and people who are in power over you, that care about you, that don't use you as just harvesters of data, that's when you'll have someone who builds you up and supports you. Because if you don't have that, it can be very hard um, to some people still do it, but I think it's more fun. Science is more fun when you have a supportive team. And that it taught me a lot of things of, okay, I want to model this behavior for with my students and how I mentor.
What a great answer. I think,
Oh, good.
no, I think that, you know, we maybe in the public perception or like maybe we don't talk about it that much, but like we think about being objective is so important in science and it's the
Yeah.
data and but it's people that are getting the
Yeah.
data, right? And
Yeah.
I've found the same thing. I had some great advice when I was looking at grad schools. A professor who said that like the best predictor of success isn't where you are, it isn't what you study, it isn't the prestige of the university, it's how well you get along with your advisor.
Yeah,
And I
it
feel like
really
you can
is the
expand
bread and
that.
butter. Yeah.
Yeah, like how well you like get along with your community, like what's your lab culture
Mhm.
like? And that's really,
Yes.
yeah, that's really
If
interesting.
they view if you make a mistake in your lab, do they view you as the mistake, or was it just a mistake and you can grow and change and you don't make that mistake again? And also, like, I think it's really valuable when not only do they view like viewing the mistakes you make is not a reflection of you as a scientist, but there's this other thing I was thinking about. I may have like lost my thought. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. That is totally fine.
Haven't had enough coffee, but I'll think of it later because we have a meeting scheduled for our seminar.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Yes. Yeah, we'll come back to that one.
Yeah.
Um, so this is sort of a maybe it's a related question, but thinking about how you were saying you model these sorts of behaviors for your students now,
Mhm.
um, what sort of advice would you give a, undergrad version of yourself working in today's science? Um,
Yeah.
so if you bumped into yourself at a conference, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I would make sure that they felt like they knew various parts of the community, how to. I felt like one of the biggest things that I like asking students is to think about what tools do they want to develop, and think about it if they're entering graduate school or they're entering a, a lab technician job or a lab manager job. Think about those transferable skills and think about if you're going to start a graduate program, look at your toolbox and say, what do I want to have in here by the end? Do I want to have some molecular tools, some phylogenetic analyses skills? Do I want to do some really cool statistics? Think about it that way, and you can build a nice, bright, shiny portfolio of experiences that way. And
Yeah.
if you don't see that in your program, that doesn't mean that you're restricted. Don't give up. Just be stubborn, and also don't be afraid to uh, reach out. And that was the other thing that I lost for a second, but I want to come back to it. Is how do we view our communities? And if I could tell a younger version of me that I was on the right track, I would make sure that she understands that this community, when you see someone that publishes a paper that's close to your research, that shouldn't be viewed as a threat. It should be viewed as like an exciting opportunity to email that person, that corresponding author or the first author grad student, and say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that you also study this obscure genus of fungus that I've been working on. And boy, we could have plenty to talk about. I'd love to share my experiences and I'd love to hear more about your work." And that's like just the basics of building a scientific community. If you can base that on common themes and get to know people, that's going to be more powerful than anything.
Yeah, I feel like sorry, I feel like that opening of doors, like we often think about how do you build community? And you really hit on something that like we're kind of all nerdy about these things. And
Yeah.
if you get an email from somebody that says, "Hey, I really like that paper. I'd love to pick your
Mhm.
brain because I'm working on XYZ." I mean, you're going to be like, "Sure, let's have a
Yeah.
Zoom, like let's do it."
Yeah.
And
Tell me everything you're up to. I'd love to learn more.
yeah, and I think it can be just that easy to start building community. And it's not something that I really learned until grad school. That like, wait,
Yeah.
I can just email somebody and be like, your stuff's cool. Can we talk? Like,
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be an extractive relation or transactional relationship. It could be just bonding with somebody else who had the same awful experience in primer design, trying to get something to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that, or trying to culture this obscurity is so fun. Trying to make it produce spores. Like there's so much shared commiseration that it's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing too to share your struggles and grow together. And then when you go to conferences, you have an ultimate conference buddy
Yeah.
that knows you better.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Um, okay, so I've got just a couple more here. Uh,
Yeah.
one that is kind of new this semester that folks had I think Heather Bergen Roller was the first one that suggested that I ask this. So what do you do when you're not sciencing? Like
Yeah.
how I like to think about work-life balance and that sort of thing. So like, yeah, when you're not chasing bees or in the lab, what are you doing?
Yeah, I work on being a full functioning human. So
I
sometimes that
love it.
involves like just being with my spouse, walking our dog, doing the laundry, taking joy in everyday things, go working out. I am so lucky, Jim. I rent a house near Overton Park,
Oh,
and I
nice.
go walk around Overton Park, or I can go down to Overton Square. So since I've moved here, I just love learning more about all the fun things there is to eat in Memphis, all
Yeah.
the fun music. So I also, when I was a PhD student, I got so kind of tied up in the lab sometimes that I decided I wanted to do community service. So there's this like tax prep program through the IRS. It's called the Volunteer Income Tax Assistant Program, IRS FIDA. And I swear, if a grad student knows how to click through software and just memorize a few rules, you
Yeah.
can help prepare taxes for low income folks in Tennessee. For instance, I did this in Wisconsin, and it brought me such joy to do
Yeah.
that on the weekend for a couple hours a week. And it was a unique thing I did during grad school, but it brought me a lot of joy to do some amount of community service too. Like I'll do my laundry, but I also love just embedding myself into the community some other way.
And that's a really nice, tangible one, right? Where it's like
Yeah,
there's a product at the end of it, a thing is done that made somebody's life just, that much
a
better. I
little
mean,
bit
how much
better.
do all of us hate taxes, right? So it's like,
We all hate
yeah,
taxes. It's like you either like have to pay somebody a lot of money and they'll take some of your refund. And I'm like, people use refunds for important things. So
yeah,
helping out with that it means a lot to me, and it feeds me just as much.
that's fantastic. Okay, so final question is basically throwing this back at you and saying, what haven't I asked you that you wish I had asked you?
Oh, what what's my playlist for doing research things?
All right,
I,
hit me with it.
I have this great Dolly Parton playlist.
Nice.
It spans most of her career, and when I work with undergraduates, I introduce them to this playlist and effectively give them about a 2 hour lecture on Dolly Parton. I got and I got a Dolly Parton cameo. It's a Dolly Parton impersonator to join in on my virtual PhD defense. I had to do it during lockdown, so I pranked my committee by
Oh
putting
my
in
God.
like a 40-second, little pep talk from Dolly Parton impersonator. And
That's
some folks
amazing.
thought it actually was Dolly Parton. So I think
Uh,
it's
I,
on
f-
Twitter or X or something, I think.
that's brilliant. And I feel like, what could be more Tennessee, right? Like
I
that's you're,
know.
you're where you
It
need to
was
be.
destiny.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That
don't be
is
afraid to find a little joy.
absolute. I love it. I love it. Um, well, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to your seminar and we'll get to chat a little bit more.
Well, it was great chit chatting.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much. And yeah, looking forward to the talk.
Yeah, I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Sounds great. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thanks very much again to our guest, Dr. Kate LeCroy. You can catch her talk September 5th at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall, as you can most weeks, 4 p.m. Ellington Hall on Thursdays. Thank you so much for tuning in.